Welcome to the Female Founder Friday podcast, a collection of inspiring conversations with the most interesting female entrepreneurs and small business owners. I'm your host, Lindsay White, and together with my incredible guests, we'll explore the struggles of being a female entrepreneur, the most important lessons, and the future of women leaders in business. I'm super passionate about helping female entrepreneurs become the calm, confident leader their team and their business need. And that's why I've created my VIP leadership coaching program. This 3-month program is specifically designed to help high-performing women uncover their authentic leadership brand and style so they can lead more effectively in every aspect of their life and their business. If you're ready to transform your leadership, connect with me today at highvoltageleadership.ca. My guest on this week's episode is Toni Collis, the CEO of Collis-Holmes Innovations, an award-winning leader, an international keynote speaker, expert consultant, leadership coach, and totally a kindred spirit. Toni began her career in supercomputing, a largely male-dominated field, and she's worked ever since to help more women build careers and move into leadership roles in the world of technology. Before leaving her career to create her own practice, Toni was a C-suite executive in a tech firm, so she knows exactly how challenging it is to grow a career in tech. And now she's on a mission to assist 2,000 women into influential roles in tech boardrooms over the next 5 years. It's a lofty goal, but if anyone can do it, she can. Toni and I are passionate about so many of the same things, and we had a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Awesome. Well, welcome, my friend Toni Collis, to the Female Founder Friday podcast. I am really excited to have you here with us today. Thanks so much for joining.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And Toni and I, we have not been connected for too terribly long. Maybe like a couple, 6 or 8 weeks, perhaps. I can't even remember. But I mean, that's because it feels like we have been friends forever. Totally feel like I have met a kindred spirit, even though we're thousands of miles away, because you're joining us from the UK today, which I love. It's really given the podcast a global flavor, and that is so cool. But yeah, we're totally, like you said before, business besties, which is so fun. So I'm really excited to hear about your journey as a female founder in your business, Toni.
Just hand on heart, I am just so excited to be here. Like ditto, kindred spirit. And I sort of, obviously knowing some about your story, I think part of it is similar stories. So yeah, I'll start from the top. Being an entrepreneur was not something I will ever aim to do or be. Like it was, I think as with many of us, it was a bit of an accident. I'm a woman in tech. I have a physics background. That's my education. Moved into the supercomputing industry. By the way, it sounds way more fancy than it really is.
Yeah.
And I was working in supercomputing, and the supercomputing industry it's very technical. It's very white, and surprise, surprise, very, very male. And I remember about 2 years into my first job out of university, standing in a room at a conference talking about the next big thing in supercomputing, which was exascale computing. I'm not even going to explain what that means. Anyways, the next big thing. And I remember looking around this room and thinking, there were about 300 people. I counted because I was just like, this doesn't feel right. 300 people in that room. 3 of them were women. I was one of them. Second was the person chairing the session, which actually happened to be my boss at the time, and 1 other woman. And I was just like, holy shit. Are women not interested in exascale? Like, this is so damn freaking exciting. And I got angry. I got angry on behalf of the human race that women were not involved in this conversation. So long story short, like that kickstarted my journey because I had this drive inside me to do something about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of women in tech movements. There's a lot of girls in tech, women who code, all that. Nobody was looking at the supercomputing industry. And so that was where my leadership journey started, because I went back to my desk, had some conversations, and ultimately I set up an organization called Women in High Performance Computing, which is another name for the supercomputing industry. Something I thought that was going to be this little Scottish or UK thing. I'm in Scotland. obviously Scotland being part of the UK, I thought it's just going to be this little thing. And I thought that was big, right?
Yeah.
This little thing, bringing women together, giving us a voice, having conversations with organizations about how to improve equity, diversity, inclusion. Within a year, we'd gone global.
I love that.
And if I'd known what I was biting off, I don't think I would have bitten. Quite frankly, it was terrifying. But that started my leadership journey. That gave me, I mean, I still had a full-time job that was technical. And actually I was coaching some clients like just this last week. And I do a lifeline exercise, like the ups and downs of our lives. And I said, well, I always have to split out this point in my career, because if I do the average, it's a bit wiggly, but it's upwards.
Yeah.
But I had two things going on. I had women in high performance computing, which was ostensibly a hobby. I had a very small amount of my paid salary for it, like 10% of my time, because my boss recognized it was a really good thing for the business. But it actually was mainly a hobby. It was what I did at every waking moment.
Right.
It was what I breathed and lived. And that was this amazing upwards trajectory, surrounded by all these incredible, inspirational women who were lifting me up, even though I was there to lift them up.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my career, I felt, was taking a nosedive. Because I had toxicity. I had a boss who told me I was never going to get promoted, a female boss, by the way, but
Yeah.
and there was a lot of negativity going on here. And I won leadership awards for my work in women in high performance computing. And yet I was having all this tough time at home, like in my day job, I should say, not home. I had the most supportive husband who actually enabled me a lot. And ultimately, like, what happened is that catapulted me. It catapulted me having surrounded by these amazing women. One, I realized I could build an organization.
Yeah.
I just figured it out. One or two, I realized I was actually a really good freaking leader.
Yeah.
And I won awards, which I never felt like I deserved, but it pointed out to people like I actually had to believe it. The international HPC community voted on an award that I won. And oh my God, you wouldn't believe how long it's taken me to be able to say that out loud.
Yes.
And actually own it.
Yeah.
And ultimately I ended up getting a job in an executive position, a C-suite in the tech industry. I did that for 18 months and it went toxic again. I know, and this is where I feel like we're also like sisters a little bit, because I know that you had a little bit of that going on in your life.
I do.
And I needed to do the next thing. And I looked at what I really cared about and I was like, it's women.
I love it.
It's elevating women. And secondly, I know I can build something from the ground up because I've just done that.
Yeah.
And so I kicked it all in, and I didn't really have a plan other than like, I'm going to give this a good go. And I can always go back and phone up my friends at all these big companies and get a job. And I felt confident in the fact that I could return. I think that's what gave me that ability to pull the plug.
Yeah.
And I kicked it off and ultimately landed on my feet, starting a business that to this day, I have never been freaking happier. Yeah. I lead the world in what I do. I've learned to own that. I coach women in tech. I am one of the few coaches in the tech industry who has experienced what it's like to be a woman in tech, going all the way to the C-suite. There are others, but the number of women who come to me said, I've had other coaches before and they just didn't get it, or they were not really doing what I needed. And so I know I have a unique set of skills, and I sit in that every day and know I'm changing the world for the better. And honestly, there's nothing better than knowing that you're making the world a better place, one step at a time.
You're just giving me the tingles. Absolutely. There is no doubt. I mean, we have connections all over the place in terms of, I mean, I'm not a woman in tech. I can't even, I mean, I can barely manage to get my MacBook going most days. But, certainly from the perspective of the leadership experiences that we have had, both positive and negative. And then what I think is really our connection is that we were able to tap into this deep inner belief that we do have value and that we have greater value than what we're being told by leaders and outside forces and industries. Right? We have far greater value than what those people, and they want us to be small. They want us to be small. They want us to live in that lead line box. And they want to keep girls like you and I with big voices and big personalities as quiet and small as possible, right? Because we're threatening.
Yes, we are.
We shake shit up. That's what we do. We make things happen. And for so many people, and a lot of female leaders included, that's really scary. right?
Yeah.
We rock the boat, Toni.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I actually listening to you saying that back, I've got tingles too. And I probably came across like super confident saying that, just hearing that reflected back on me there. And I just wanted to tell your audience, like, I've had imposter syndrome every freaking day for the last decade.
Yeah.
And there are days when I'm like, why am I doing this? And it always comes back to my why. I'm changing the world here. When I first started saying that out loud, I used to laugh. I used to say, I'm here to change the world. Because I couldn't admit it. And now I'm like, holy fucking shit, I'm here to change the world.
Yeah.
Like, no ifs and buts about it. I'm chipping away, but I'm here.
Yeah.
And that gets me through my imposterism, which is there all of the time. The difference between now and a decade ago is I now have the tools and techniques to understand it's imposter syndrome. It's perfectionism that's crippling me, and it's not helpful. And therefore I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to push forward through that discomfort. I thought that was a really important thing to share, because
Yeah,
I know people can feel like, well, that's all well and good for you to say, but like, I don't feel that way.
yeah.
That's okay.
And I want to reinforce what you just said, which is that you do get to choose. You can listen to that inner critic. You can listen to that saboteur voice that tells you you're not enough. You're not enough as an employee. You're not enough as a mother. You're not enough as a CEO. You're not enough as an entrepreneur. I have that same voice. That voice tries to tell me every single day I should shut my practice down and just go back to being an HR business partner. That voice is full of shit. It's lying. It's lying to you. It's lying. Toni, you just called it out. It's lying to you. It's lying to me. It's lying to whoever's listening. It is a liar. And you do not have to listen to those lies. I think that's the thing, is that we get convinced because that voice is in our own head that we have to give it extraordinary weight.
Yes.
Right? And we don't.
And the other thing here is like listening to you just say that, like, you know, I wake up every day and, you know, I think about quitting essentially. And I had to stop myself gasping at that, because like, obviously it's a recording. But the idea of like knowing what I know about you and knowing what I know you're giving to the world, the idea looking at you that you could ever think for a moment that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing is horrific to me. And that's part of what we need to realize about ourselves, is the rest of the world is looking at you and seeing something extraordinary. And it's about time that you saw that in yourself.
It is like, amen to that. That is the problem. And I say this all the time. You can't read the label from inside the bottle. And I don't know why, but I always think of a Heinz 57 glass ketchup bottle when I say that out loud. But you really can't. Like, this is the struggle that we all have. And you and I know, believe that particularly for women, this is a major issue. We cannot truly see our astronomical greatness from the inside out. And it is because that critical voice is trying to convince us that we're not worthy. So we do need to have people and places and spaces where we get that reflection back. That's what's really key. So whether that's a coach, whether that's a leader that really sees you for who you are and pushes you to move forward. I mean, we can get that from great friend groups. We can get that from a great partner. I mean, you talked about your husband being a great champion, and mine is too. Having those people in our world that say, hey, actually, that is you, like, you're actually totally wrong. You are awesome. And here's a list of 50 reasons why I see your awesomeness, right?
Yeah.
I think there's also an important point you made, Toni, about being afraid and doing it anyway. Getting up every morning with the self-doubt, remembering what your purpose is. That you're going to change the world. And I absolutely adore that. And then just doing it, even when you don't feel like it.
Yes, 100%. And I just, that was one of the things I've really kind of like honed in on as a coach, actually, as something I see as needing to work on all the time. I mean, we all know that, you know, the theory around the comfort zones, and that to grow, we need to get out of our comfort zone. We all know that theory. One of the things I've seen quite strikingly as a coach is your comfort zone is not a static thing. It is either growing because you're working on it and you're getting into discomfort. And I always say to my clients, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah.
That is your goal
Said.
to do extraordinary things, right? And what I've seen because of COVID, actually, and I've seen this in myself as well, the areas of our lives where we're not getting uncomfortable, our comfort zone does not stay static, it shrinks. And I've seen this in myself with COVID. Like yesterday, I went to the opticians and the dentist for the first time since the beginning of COVID, because we're finally allowed to. And I finally got my second jab and I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And honest to God, I was so uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, holy heck, it shrunk.
Yeah.
Of course it has. Of course it has.
Yeah.
And I think that getting up every day and pushing ourselves is as much about stretching and growing and doing good things. Because if you don't, you're going to wake up one morning and realize you don't do 10 of the things you used to do a decade ago.
I love that observation. What a beautiful reflection. And I think you're right, particularly over the last 18 months, our comfort zones really have become quite small, haven't they? Yeah, I love that, Toni.
It just really struck me. I talk about this with my clients and I was like, oh yeah, happening to me too. And it's across every aspect of our lives, right? So like I've definitely grown over the last 18 months in my business and all that sort of stuff. But in our other aspects, because I am a natural hermit, I'm a real introvert, and there's nothing better to me after a day of Zoom calls with my amazing clients of snuggling up on the sofa with a hot chocolate and like just not interacting with the human race. That's my idea of heaven. So of course, COVID has been quite wonderful for me in that respect. There's no heartbreak and sorrow in the world, and that breaks my heart. And so the way I deal with that is to like sit at home with my little comfort zone. Of course, right?
No, I love that. But what I hear in your voice and in this conversation is that you actually got curious about, this being out in the world, going to the dentist and the optician. It made you uncomfortable, and your reaction to that was, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what's going on there. Right. And I think when we lead with curiosity, just noticing and asking what's up with that, like in its simplest form, that is where we can recognize the fear and discomfort for what it is, something that's truly false, and then move forward and say, yeah, I'm going to do this anyways. Or, oh, no, maybe I have a fear for a real reason, right? Like, fair enough. Sometimes the fear is there to keep us safe. But I love that you really lead with curiosity. And I think that that's actually what's really key here.
Yeah, I love that you've highlighted that. I think part of why I've been able to do some of what I've done is I'm a naturally curious person. I'm a scientist by training, and that largely comes from like, how on earth does this work?
Right.
Yeah. And that applies so much to me now. I've got coach training and I have my own coach as well. I think the coaching, what that's really done for me is allow me to apply that curiosity to myself, which makes me a better coach for my clients as well. And there's the leadership element. I think I am a better leader today than I was before I was coaching, which is why I'm coach leaders, but I also coach them how to coach, because that makes you a better leader.
Totally. The coach-like approach to leadership really is the most impactful. I don't think there's any doubt. I want to ask you, because I'm sure you have several stories that you could offer us. Toni, where have you messed it up? Like, where have you really, really cocked it up?
Oh, so many. All the time, by the way. All the time. Okay, so let's just pull out some little nuggets here. Early on, definitely, I was a classic. I used to tell people too much. I would say I used to trust people too much. And I now am cautious of saying that, because I actually truly believe you should lead with trust.
Yeah.
And so that's not quite what I mean when I say trust people too much. I think what it is as leaders, we've got to be cognizant of what is appropriate for us to share and what isn't. And even though I'm an introvert, I'm a bit of an oversharer, to be honest. I mean, I always say to my clients, I'm a completely open book. You can ask me anything. And I think that actually really helps my clients, but it doesn't apply to the majority of the workplace. And yes, not a good plan. And so I think some of my early missteps were definitely oversharing with people who shouldn't know some of the stuff they knew. I believe in transparent leadership. So, I want everybody to know all the mechanics of what's going on in the organization I'm building. But I know, for example, now as a business owner, that it's not appropriate to tell all of my team members, because I have like 6 people supporting me, not full time. They're all kind of like, VAs, accountants, social media managers and stuff there. But it's not appropriate to share with all of them my long-term strategy. They know some of it,
Right.
but they'd get distracted by stuff that I haven't even figured out yet.
Right.
And I think that oversharing really derailed me at various points early in my career. People got distracted by the wrong thing. It's the classic. I've also had bosses who didn't share because they're worried about people being distracted. I think that's a different issue.
Yeah.
I've also shared genuine issues and concerns with people who then use that against me.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking when that happens. And like I said, I want you to lead with the assumption of trust, but that doesn't mean that you're going to share everything with everybody, because there are people out there who are dicks.
Yeah, it's the truth. It is the truth.
And you don't give people ammunition to hurt you, basically. But also, so that's one of the ones I kind of wish I'd figured out earlier. Like, what is the right amount of sharing? And also another big one actually for me that kind of derailed me a little bit was, we've all been micromanaged, right?
Oh heavens, yes.
I know, and that really bothered the fuck out of me. I'm swearing a lot on this podcast. You did tell me I could, so we're good.
No, it's all good. We're grown up here.
Anyway, it really, really bothered me. And so when I started managing, I was the extreme hands-off manager. That was my style. I learned through, this has kind of been my operating procedure my entire life. I look at people, I do this. My mother says I do this with my family because I got 2 older sisters. I look at people and I look at all the things I do not like and I avoid those things. That's kind of like how I got to like the age of 25, I reckon. What do I not like about the human race? Well, I'm not going to do that. And I'm good at observing that. But what I did is, therefore, I became a manager and I did not lead. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I just said, here's the thing, go do, come back when you're done. I don't want to hear. Right. Essentially, I didn't mean I don't want to hear. I wanted them to come back to me when they had a problem. Guess what? They don't come back to you. As an entrepreneur, you cannot afford to do that. No. I do have a very hands-off approach with my team. And actually, a couple of my team members love that. But I worked really hard with them within their first couple of months to really build that sense of trust, so that they know, 1, exactly what they're doing, 2, exactly when to raise flags, and 3, that actually, what I really love is having a coffee chat with you. So everything could be going tickety-boo and fabulous and everything's working like a really well-oiled machine. But why don't we have a coffee chat every now and then? But I'm not going to initiate it. I put the onus on my team members. And I kind of wish I'd figured out that style of leadership earlier. I'm hands-off now, but I'm hands-off in a more productive way right now. So that really derailed a few things early on for me, big time.
I actually really love that, because you're right. There is a lot of space in between chronic micromanager and completely hands-off leader. There's a lot of area to cover in between. And I think it's as bad or worse to send people away with very little direction, instruction, follow-up, engagement, feedback, high quality feedback. We could do an entire episode just on that. But you leave people to their own devices and they lack direction, they lack focus. And the truth is, it impacts their confidence.
Yes.
I don't know what she wants. I guess I just have to figure it out. I don't want to bug her. She's told me to go away and figure it out, but I don't know how to figure it out. And oh my God, how am I going to figure it out? And then, it just sends them on a bit of a spiral. So I actually love that you really highlighted that, because I do think that there is a sweet spot in the middle. I think it's really about, and I talk a lot about your own leadership brand and style. Like, what's authentic for you? Right? What brings your uniqueness and your superpowers to life in your leadership? But also, it's really about listening and understanding, what do the different people on your team need? Toni, you just talked about that. Like, some people need more check-ins, more direction, more feedback. Others, After a pretty short period of time, they're on their own. They just need some regular check-ins so they know where your head is at, and off you go. Right. Yeah. So having the confidence in your own leadership brand and having the flexibility to accommodate others, particularly when you're entrepreneurs like you and I, we have small teams, we got to pay attention, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of the things I love that I've learned as an entrepreneur is the beautiful thing I have now that I didn't have when I worked for other people is I get to choose my team.
Yep.
And you have way more control over that than I think a lot of us think we do. I have deliberately hired people, put people on contracts to work with me who I know are going to operate in a way that makes my life easier. Yeah. I don't have to worry about managing Fred, who needs a lot of hands-on anymore. Yeah. I don't have that obligation to keep Fred on my team. It's my business. And I think that was something, it took me a long time, having worked in big corporate, it took me a long time to realize I don't have to hire somebody who doesn't work the way I want. And the other big thing I figured out, and my coach was the one suggested this to me, and I was like, oh, holy heck, this is the best thing, is when you bring somebody onto your team, tell them how to make you really happy. Yeah. So for me, I always have a bit of a chat with somebody, which is like, I want you to have a go at solving problems by yourself. Like, we'll work up to that. But if you ever do not know what to do, you need to bring that to me immediately. Yeah. I do not want to find out a month down the road that you've been struggling about this for a month, because most of the time I've done this and I can solve that problem for you faster. Yeah. Whereas I know other people who need to be really engaged the whole time. Other people are like, oh, I don't bring problems to me. I just don't want to know. If the person you've hired doesn't know how you are going to operate, how are they supposed to make you happy? Have that conversation with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you brought up a couple great points here. And the first one is, really communicating effectively as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, having the conversation. It really is as simple as that. Ask the questions, make the statements. Be clear, right? I think I know you probably encounter this too. I have clients when I ask them, well, when's the last time you had that conversation? And they say, well, never. And I have to say to them, well, how do you expect your team? Like, your team is not a group of mind readers. I don't see any crystal balls in this office space. And I know that's a little bit snarky and a little bit sassy, but like, it drives home the point that the people that work for us, whether they're employees or consultants and contractors, they can't read our minds.
Absolutely.
They need clear instruction and conversation, and they do need ongoing feedback, right? I think feedback is incredibly important, and it needs to be a valuable thing, right? Not used as a weapon, but like, just talk to them. Tell them what your expectations are. Tell them what their accountabilities are. Be clear, right? It's just, it really is that simple. And what a great point.
It is that simple. And yet we all get tripped up by it. Every single one of us.
Yeah. Somehow setting this expectation that the people that support us should be able to mind read. It's the truth. It takes like, right? It's ridiculous when you hear it said out loud, but you're right. We do get caught up in that trap. And as leaders and business owners, I think we need to step up and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I did not do a great job communicating with you on that. Let's put our heads together and solve that problem, or find that solution, or tackle that road. Like, anyways. Yeah. So I really love that. This is great. Such great advice for female entrepreneurs. And I think a lovely sort of eye-opening conversation. One of the questions I really love to wrap up with, Toni, is how do you lead? Like, what does that leadership word really mean for you?
Yeah, so I knew you were going to ask me this question, so I had to think to myself beforehand, and I'm thinking empowerment, and as I said, trust first, delegate, and all that sort of stuff. And then actually, just with this conversation, I've thought to myself, like, really ultimately, what does leadership mean to me? And I think it is epitomized by how I operate day to day. My goal in life is to make myself unnecessary. I'm leading with, and I did this with women in high performance computing. Women in high performance computing is not unnecessary. I stepped back from running it a year ago to focus on my business. It is not unnecessary. It's probably going to be around for a very long time, which breaks my heart. But with that, it was really completely clear to me. I set it up to make it obsolete. Success was that was an obsolete organization. My business, which is about elevating women in tech, whether they are VPs or CEOs, whatever they are, right? Elevating women in tech and allowing them to thrive. My goal is to make that mission of mine obsolete. As I keep saying, I'm here to change the world. And if I've done what I set out to achieve, and part of me thinks it's not possible in my lifetime, given all the data out there.
Right.
But ultimately, I am operating on the assumption that I want to be unnecessary. This current mission, I am always going to find other missions. And I think when you lead with that, you show up in a different way because it's about everything other than you. It's not about you. It's about your impact on the world. And you have a different lens, whether it is my empower people, delegate better, lead with the presumption of trust. You're doing all of that through the lens of this is not about me.
No.
And that whole, I'm here to make this different is just, it's my driving force. That I think is my course corrector when I feel like I'm kind of like, oh, doesn't feel quite right. What am I doing wrong? And I ask myself, how am I making myself obsolete? And I think that really helps me.
That is super cool. I really, that's really shifting the way I'm thinking right in this moment. Toni, I really appreciate the sort of grand perspective of how am I really building myself out of this? Like if I've done everything right, they don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
Whether we're leading in a corporate environment, whether we're leading a business, I think that is really profound. I should be building something that doesn't need me involved in it day to day, hour to hour.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs that really have growing businesses, and working with them to get that CEO perspective and really thinking about, legacy, right?
Yes.
And building a business that they don't have to, well, and in fact, they shouldn't have their fingers in all the pies, right? Like if you're doing it right, the business should run very effectively without you in it. So I appreciate the really global and universal nature of that, building myself out of it. It's beautiful.
It works. I love that you've highlighted that because it works on every single level, doesn't it? Like, I mean, I work on the basis that my clients, although I have long-term relationships, some of my clients have worked with me for years, others just come and work with me for 6 months. My goal is to make what I'm doing with them right now unnecessary for them in the future. It's one of the reasons I don't like a lot of traditional coaching models, that because some of them are very focused on accountability, and I'm like, I'm not going to be here, at least not for this. We might move on to something else, but I'm not going to be here for this in 6 months. Let's figure out how to teach you self accountability, right? Make yourself obsolete, whether that's with the people you're working with, whether it's with your team, you empower them, whether it's your mission for your business, like always. And if you always show up with that attitude, your mission is going to be moving forwards as well. So you're never actually going to be obsolete. So don't get panicky, but you're going to be achieving so much more than everybody else is in the slow lane. You're in the fast lane, my love.
Well, yeah, because it leaves so much room for iteration and invention and new. Like that, like it's not about making yourself obsolete and then you die. It's making yourself obsolete in your current incarnation and then moving forward in a really innovative, unique, interesting way. So I really love that fine line you draw there, Toni. That's really beautiful. And I think it's actually so present for anyone who is in a leadership role at all. I really love that. That's a beautiful note to end today's podcast on. And Toni, tell us where we can find you, particularly for those that are listening that are women in tech. Where do we find you, Toni?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I am Toni Collis, and I'm on Facebook. unfortunately, all my URLs are slightly different. On Facebook, I'm Toni C for Toni Collis, Toni C Coach. And my website is tonicollis.com. You can go there and find out all about me, find out about my podcast,
Yeah.
and all the things I do. And I just, if nothing else, I love to connect with women who are inspiring the world. So if that's you, reach out to me. I'd love to connect.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thanks again, Toni, for your time today. We'll make sure that all of that information's in the show notes. You can connect with my friend Toni, and she's pretty fabulous. So look her up for sure. And I know that you and I will be talking again very soon, because Lord knows we have a lot to say.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been absolutely splendid.
Oh, totally my pleasure, Toni. We'll talk soon. To everyone tuning in today, thanks for listening to the Female Founder Friday podcast. I found it so interesting that Toni's whole idea as a leader is to empower and elevate women in tech to the point where they don't need her anymore. Now, that is super powerful. You can find out more about Toni and the amazing work she does with her clients at tonicollis.com. And of course, you can always connect with me on Instagram at High Volt Leadership. The Female Founder Friday podcast has a goal to impact 1,000 listeners. And it would mean the world to me if you left this episode a 5-star review and shared it with all of your friends. Let's engage 1,000 female entrepreneurs and really amplify the message. Thanks again for being a part of the show. And don't forget to connect with me at highvoltageleadership.ca.